Welcome, everyone, to those of us joining today for the Spirit of the Time. We cannot wait to fly with Mike West. We will get started right at the top of the hour. For those joining, thank you so much for being with us on this Friday, February 16th, as we get to time travel with Mike West. We will get started right at the top of the hour. Thank you all so much for joining us. We will time travel today with Mike West. Enjoy this fun slideshow. For those of you just joining us, thank you so much for being here on this Friday, February 16th, as we are going to time travel with Mike West. We'll get started in less than 60 seconds. Welcome to Zeitgeist Design and Production. I'm Becky Kiefer, Studio Director. Just try comparing your pricey new Apple Vision Pro to sailing across the seas of time and space and reliving history or exploring the world of tomorrow. Doesn't even compare, right? Here in the Zeitgeist Creative Studio, imagination rules and time is always of the essence. This is where immersion artists Ryan Harmon and Joe Lancicero study the past and spin the present, envisioning the future of location-based entertainment, or what we like to call UXIRL, user experiences in real life. The Spirit of the Time Zoomcast offers a sneak peek behind the themes. Each month, we move you, without a ride system, inviting one incredibly talented and influential colleague aboard our time machine. We set controls for milestone moments in that person's career, an attempt to unravel the mystery of what makes a guest experience timely yet timeless. And because we're live, you can type questions into the chat box and our passenger will answer them after that hour-long journey. Climbing aboard our time machine today for our 30-second flight is one of the few, the proud, who have so effortlessly created innovative and beloved attractions for both Disney and Universal, Mike West. With a clear, robust, rich, and resonant voice, and a penchant for writing particularly purple prose, Mike West has written or produced such projects as The Monster Sound Show, the Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular, the ExtraTERRORestrial Alien Encounter, the Simpsons Ride, Transformers the Ride, Despicable Me Minion Mayhem, and Skull Island Reign of Kong. It's now my pleasure to introduce our time machine pilots, Zeitgeist President and Chief Creative Officer Ryan Harmon, and Zeitgeist Executive Vice President and Chief Art Director Joe Lancicero, along with a man who never met a mother-in-law joke he didn't use, Mike West.
All right.
Wait. Here's our thing.
Oh, we are. I wish I would have had a diaper because we just came back from 1995, the opening of the
Alien Encounter. Oh my God, Mike, you scared the out of us.
Wow. And so ironic that one of the scariest shows ever written, so scary that they had to change it, was written by one of the funniest guys ever. But I think that speaks to Mike and his versatility and all the incredible things he did.
Great to see you, Mike.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for coming aboard today.
Great to be here.
Start off back in like the late 1950s, early 1960s, I think. It looks like we're in Broomall, Pennsylvania, and you've got hundreds of army men, and I don't know if you're shooting them with a BB gun or blowing them up with firecrackers.
Or both.
Or both.
All of the above.
Tell us about your violent origins.
Well, yeah, I grew up with two older brothers, Keith and Bill West, in Broomall, Pennsylvania, in a street called Dogwood Lane, and went to Marple Newtown Senior High, which I think there's some alumni on this call today.
Hello,
yeah,
alumni.
we stayed in touch a long time. I think Lynn Oberger's here and a few other people, but yeah, it was a great childhood. I was very blessed, and I had hundreds of these little, all different sizes, but army men that I would play. That was my writing and my acting first began. Fortunately, the acting didn't extend beyond the BB gun in later years. In fact, I've never shot any kind of weapon in my life ever since the BB gun. So, but yeah, it was a great childhood. My dad was a professor at Drexel University for 40 years.
Wow.
So that had a little something to do with where I went to school.
Yeah.
And I was very blessed. I had a very good childhood. So
And you like to watch Red Skelton.
Yeah.
I did for the everybody under 60 age. He was a great classic comedian, and I used to watch him all the time. And I loved him because he not only was he funny, but he could create all these different characters every week on his show. And he always smiled, and he would laugh at his own material, but he was one of those guys that could get away with it because you could just tell he was enjoying what he was doing. And I always thought someday I want to be able to enjoy what I'm doing as much as that man did.
Yeah. Wow. You know, another thing about Red Skelton is behind, it's a little bit like Walt Disney saying, behind every smile, there's a tear. Behind every smile. He always had a way of putting some kind of empathy and pathos and something that, spoke to the human condition and made you, even though it could be funny and outrageous, there was always kind of this real human side to it.
Yeah, well, he had Freddie the Freeloader and kind of these underdog characters that he would play in his sketches, and he'd always comically come out on top. And he was also a great artist, actually. He was a
Yeah. He did all those
Did
clowns.
clowns, yeah, clowns.
Okay,
yeah,
anyway, moving on.
that's why I fell
Okay.
short of Red Skelton was the arts part.
Yeah. So Drexel University was traditionally an engineering school. How did you get a Bachelor of Science in Communications?
Well, as I mentioned, my dad was there for 40 years. So my brothers and I had stamped on our foreheads that we were born where we were going to go to school because it was,
Right.
I like to call it a professor's scholarship.
Okay.
It was a free ride. Yes,
Yeah.
and Drexel was an engineering and science school back in those days. And people used to ask me, well, are you an engineer? And I would say no, and it's a good thing for the rest of the world that I'm not. So I first started out in business administration, and after a year, quickly realized that maybe wasn't my calling, which is funny considering the producing work I did later on in life. But then I went into humanities and sociology, and myself and about 6 or 7 other people actually started the communications degree program at Drexel. We pretty much got to make it up as we went along, and so we chose all the easy courses, of course. But now I think you can get a PhD at the school, and they should have at least named a building after me.
Yeah, exactly.
So during that period, we're sitting here in a dinner theater.
Yeah.
And there's this tall guy playing Thomas Jefferson. What's this all about?
Very accurate.
Yeah. It was the bicentennial, and there's a riverfront dinner theater in downtown Philadelphia.
There you
Wow,
are.
there you are.
That's the guy reading his iPad in the back corner.
Time travel.
Yeah. So I had done several shows with this company, including Damn Yankees and Showboat. And then during the bicentennial, they decided to do 1776. So
Wow.
I was TJ. And when they handed out that, I think they came out with the new $2 bills or something that year, and I got to go to the bank and be posing with TJ on the.
Cool.
Oh,
Yeah, that was my big calling that year.
So you're now 21 years old. You've found your beautiful wife, Chris. You're married, and you're honeymooning at the Contemporary Hotel at Walt Disney World. And this is your first theme park experience, your first Disney theme park.
My first visit to a Disney park was during our honeymoon for a few nights. We stayed at the Contemporary Hotel.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what did you think when you saw the Magic Kingdom for the first time?
I thought it was amazing. And it was funny because years later, when we moved to California and I saw the Disneyland castle, I thought, what'd they do to it? It shrunk.
right.
With this park.
It's about, I had the opposite experience because I grew up with Disneyland, California. And then the first time I went to Walt Disney World, it just did like this weird trip to your head because you're standing there and go, well, I'm in a Disneyland, but that castle's really big and the streets are bigger.
It messes with them on. Wow. So 1976, we're in Long Beach, New Jersey, and I'm out of gas, Mike, and and here you are pumping my gas, and I've got the radio on at night, and you're on the radio. What's going on here?
Yeah, well, it was Long Beach Island, New Jersey, and Chris and I lived there for about a year or so because I went down. I wanted to be a DJ.
Oh.
So here I was with a college degree. And actually, coming from Drexel, I said I was a petroleum dispensing engineer.
Not gas.
Yeah. So I was doing that during the day, and I happened to meet the guy who was the overnight DJ, Jim Jeffries, was his on-air name. And so he would allow me to come over at like 3 o'clock in the morning and play DJ for an hour on his show when, myself, Jim, and the raccoons and the Pine Barrens were listening.
Right.
Yeah. So I got to do that for a while and got my first taste of being on the air. Then it came time to hire full time, and there was a friend of the station's owner that ended up getting the job instead of me. So, but you know what? That was all meant to be. God has planned.
because a year later we're here in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and you're performing on stage. What is
somebody had seen me in 1776, and they asked me to come up and do song and dance work at Hershey Park.
Wow.
And
really?
I got my first taste of management because I was a stage manager because I think it paid an extra $10 or something a week. So yeah, I did a summer at Hershey Park.
Wow.
Wow. All kinds of performing? Or were you behind?
It was one show. It was called Four on a Stage. I didn't send you the cowboy picture because I thought that would be taken a little too far. So yeah, so we were there for a summer, and after that we packed up what we couldn't carry and our station wagon, no place to live, no place to work, and headed west.
Wow.
So, okay.
Wow. So you came to LA and you were part of the KISS broadcasting workshop. And you had a nickname around this time?
Yeah, it was Mike McPipes. Yeah. So I
I'm
figured I'd
surprised that didn't stick.
And if Joe's in the market for an RV, is that you over there
Right.
pitching the Winnebago?
Yeah, I did. I was to get myself through the KISS broadcasting workshop. I sold RVs at California Coach in El Monte, the largest
Whoa.
RV dealership in the southern area.
There you go.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's interesting, a couple of the other people we've spoken to on this show, were salespeople. And
Eddie.
Eddie Sato
Yeah.
was one example.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just think, what we ended up doing, probably more so in your case as a producer and, pitching shows,
Yeah.
being able to sell.
Absolutely.
Is all, all those skills you learned trying to sell an RV, I'm sure paid off later when you're trying to sell a show to Michael Eisner.
Yeah. Yeah, the costs were a little different, but it was.
Yeah, right.
So 1978, you're in Coos Bay, Oregon. What's going on here?
Well, after I got out of the KISS broadcasting workshop, I was looking for my first gig as a DJ, and a little tiny station in Coos Bay, Oregon was offering the highest paying monthly job for a DJ. I think it was $450 a month or $500 a month.
A month.
A month.
Yeah, a month. So I went up to Coos Bay for a month and was up there, and I started out from 2 to 6 in the morning. We had 1,000 watts during the day and 250 at night, so the pizza guy across the street could hear me. It was a step up from the raccoons in the Jersey pipe there.
Wow.
But I was there for a month, and Chris moved up, and she kind of said, I'd like to go back to civilization. So let's see, career wife. So I went with the wife part, and we moved back to LA.
Okay, wow. So it's 1979 now, you're 25 and you're going to a Dodger game and you're in a little mini mart. What is going on here? Because this is
It's a seminal moment.
In your
It
career.
was a God incident that changed my life completely. The Phillies won. That's what changed. No,
All right.
no, but I had my Phillies cap on, and I stopped at the Pantry Supermarket in Pasadena to buy some snacks to take to the game. And I had this tap on my shoulder, and this voice behind me goes, "Hey, yo, you from Philly?" And I turned around and I said, "Yes, my good man. I can tell from your excellent elocution, you must be from the same region." And it was a young guy named Mike McCullough, who was an engineer working in a company I'd never heard of called WED Enterprises on some funky project called Epcot Center. So we became instant homies. And of course, I gave him my resume because I thought that sounds like a fun job.
Yeah.
And I didn't really hear anything. And then a few months later, Chris had convinced me to go to an employment agency because, you left out Beano's. I was at Beano's.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah. Retail stores.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The big Beano's.
Right.
So yeah, when we came back from Oregon, I got a job as a media manager at Beano's, which I know sounds like a pizzeria, but we had about 60 retail stores throughout Central and Northern California.
Wow.
And and we did hang gliding competitions. That was my brilliant idea for an advertising campaign.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So I went to an employment agency to talk to somebody about changing jobs, and I sat down to talk to this guy, and he said, "Well, I don't really deal with your kind of people." And I thought, "Well, that's interesting. Thank you." And he said, a creative guy,
Oh, okay.
So he said, "You need to talk to that woman behind you." So I literally, without getting up, spun my chair around to the desk behind me. And this nice lady said, "Well, if you had your choice of anywhere in the world to work, where would it be?" And I said, "Well, you've probably never heard of it, but there's a company called WED Enterprises." She was Marty Sklar's wife's aunt. And,
Marty Sklar. Wow.
yeah, for people who don't know, at that time, you want to be a Disney legend, Marty was a vice president of creative for WED Enterprises. So obviously, Rosalie Zwain, the lady I was speaking to, got me an interview. And I got to go in and have an interview with Randy Bright.
Wow.
Okay. And then you wrote a paper.
Yeah. How did that go with Randy?
Oh, well, it was interesting because I came in and at the time, Randy and Rick Rothschild were writing the American Adventure show for Epcot. And so I said, well, I played Thomas Jefferson on stage. Would that help? And he goes, no.
No.
So I showed him my portfolio, which at the time said things like a dazzling assortment of spring blouses in new colors and prints, you know. And he just kind of went, that's not what we do.
No.
So I said, well, let me write something. And he said, sure, go write. I don't care what it is. Go write something. So I went back to Beano's actually, and on the typesetting machine, because I could change the text easily on it. I wrote a story called The Interview about my day going to 1401 Flower and going through the interview process. And lo and behold, Randy liked it. And he hired me as a communications writer under Mark Nowotnik in 1980.
Right. And for those watching, exactly what does a communications writer do or did then?
Oh, well, at that point, oh yeah, this is the letter that really changed my life when I got this in the mail. Chris and I had moved 9 times in the first 3 years of our marriage.
Wow.
And, you know, doing all kinds of strange jobs and DJ. And then to get this letter from the Walt Disney Company was pretty extraordinary. And it really started me on a whole new path in my life.
Wow.
Well, what annoyed me is I got offered $300 a week 7 years later. So I don't know about inflation, but something's up with that. Okay.
But anyway, when my first job was doing the nomenclature for the Italy, Japan, and Mexico pavilions at Epcot. So my mom was great. She thought she was telling everybody that her son was now a writer for Disney, and I was naming bathrooms for the Japan pavilion.
Well, technically you were, right?
Yeah.
Technically I was doing, but it's funny. A lot of shows have come and gone over the years, but the plaque copy that I wrote for the Japan pavilion, a lot of the names in the stores and the restaurant are still there.
Awesome. Your work lives on.
Yeah. Although I just saw that they changed El Rio del Tiempo, which was my name, into the Grand Fiesta Tour for the boat ride.
Right. Yeah.
They come and go.
Yeah.
So what your first real script was for?
The first real script I wrote was for Hooter the Owl. In the preview center that shows off, they're showing off the animatronics figures for the upcoming Epcot Center project.
Wow.
And wonderful man named Hal Smith, who was a Disney voice for many years. Oh, there's the. And as he spoke, the book to the left would turn pages, and when we talk about the different characters that you would be meeting on your visit to Epcot.
Wow. That's so cool.
Very cool.
And you were friends with a couple of Disney legends right off the bat, it sounds like.
It was great, Ryan, because when I got there, the first generation of Imagineers were all there. And ExtraTERROrestrial became my instant mentor because I just loved X.
Awesome.
And of course, Marty, but people like Blaine Gibson, and we'd go back and stand in his sculpture shop and just watch him work. And he was such a humble, nice person, as they all were.
Yeah.
They would just share their time with us ad infinitum. You could sit there all day, just talk with these people. And of course, at the time, none of us knew who these guys were. We just thought they were older guys working on projects with us. But as time went on, you realize who they were and how they were willing to share what they knew about the industry was just amazing.
You know, the longer I'm away from all that, and every time I look back, it's all the more meaningful. And you know how fortunate we were, our generation, that, you know, I never got to meet Walt, but we got to work with all the guys who not only worked directly with Walt, but they created the industry. They created this. So I mean, how fortunate were we? That's true. We're very blessed to have those guys with us when we were growing up in business.
Yeah, there's Randy. Wow.
Yeah, and that's Don Lewis in the front, who Don and I ended up doing many shows together. And in fact, Don and I kind of got a reputation that we had, once I started writing and directing voice talent, we had several of the voice talent that came in, and once they did our show, within a few weeks, they passed away.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I blame it on Don because he was so rough on him. But I see that Don's on the call today. So Don, it's your fault.
Okay. Note to self: don't be in a show directed by Don.
One of the. So that was kind of the hint. But we had one case where Hans Zimmer came in to record a script that I had written, and I made some kind of comment, could you try it again a different way or something better or whatever? And typical Hans Zimmer goes, well, I would do it better if I had a better script.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Great.
I crawled back under the console and let Don handle the rest of it.
So then you learned a lot about plants growing without soil. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I got into my first. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. You froze
you
for a
froze.
second. We were worried.
Oh, okay. Yeah, how could I freeze in this environment?
I
Yeah,
know.
really.
It's so warm.
But yeah, my first show script for an Epcot show or a pavilion was the Listen to the Land boat ride.
Yeah.
And when we first opened, it was live. So I spent many hours riding through the trough inside the land pavilion, writing the script for the live narrators. And being me, of course, I wanted to make some joke and have some fun with things. But the scientists of the land pavilion said, "Thou shalt not make joke about pink banana squash."
Oh. But they have that great folk song playing.
Yeah.
Let's just do the land.
Yeah. And I was fortunate to work with Dr. Carl Hodges, who was our consultant on that project, and it was great. It was a lot of fun. We didn't know if it was 3 a.m. or 3 p.m. inside the pavilion when we were working on it, but it was great.
Yeah. So 1983 comes, Epcot opens, and it's probably the first major layoff at Imagineering, historic, because it generated so many individual companies around town.
All the people who left
Yeah.
went on to start. Yeah, they're all companies.
Yeah, Technifex, Wet Enterprises, those were all
Yeah,
launched.
Bob Rogers.
Yeah.
Bob Rogers, they all went after they left. But
Yeah.
it was a tough year because after we opened Epcot and Tokyo Disneyland, for a year, we went through layoffs every Friday. They were
Ooh.
off. Instead of all at once, it was every Friday for a year. And you didn't know come Friday morning if you'd be back on Monday or you had the whole weekend free and then some.
Right.
Wow. So you just didn't go in on Fridays,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Yeah, I would skip Fridays. I would call it in. But I was blessed to survive that cut and continued on my way.
Wow, that's great.
Wow.
So then you became a show writer and you started working on something called Dream
Dreamfinders.
Finders. Yeah. tell us
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we had Dreamfinder in the Journey to Imagination Pavilion, and
Right.
somebody decided that might be a good idea. The Disney Channel was new at that point, and they were looking
Yeah.
for content. And so they decided to do a show about Dreamfinder called Dreamfinders.
Oh.
So myself and Bob Garner and Larry Gertz and some other people went down to, I think at that point it was called Laird International Studios in Culver City. And we were there for about a year and produced I think we got 2 of them shot and done, and one of them aired on the Disney Channel, and then were replaced by bugs or something. I don't know what it was. But
Well, and
But it was
during that time, you were also having some fun on the weekends doing.
that's careful, Joe. Would you say that?
Oh,
Yeah, I was actually a mobile DJ in the LA area for a company called You Should Be Dancing.
Oh.
So on weekends, I'd go and pick up a truck and a trailer and travel around anywhere from Dodger Stadium to halls all over Southern California, doing DJ work.
Bar mitzvahs?
You
weddings.
name it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I did
Yeah.
bar mitzvahs, weddings, funerals. Well, no, not funerals.
Wow.
Wow.
So yeah, that was an interesting. Well, it was some extra money, and I was able to go back to my DJ roots at that time, and
Yeah.
fun with it.
So 1984, there was a second wave of attractions opening at Epcot
Yeah.
and the Seas Pavilion. And
Yeah.
tell us about your experience at the Seas Pavilion.
Yes, Dr.
The Seas was probably one of my favorite projects I ever worked on, and a lot of that I attribute to the leadership that we had in Tim Delaney, who is the creative lead, and the science lead was Kim Murphy, and
wow.
it was just a great experience. Yeah, that's me above the G on
The
top of the
G-
rock.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
But
Fall.
we were a lot of the big projects the parks had opened at that point, so our team was kind of sequestered up on the second floor of the 1401 building by ourselves. And we had guys like Greg Wilsbach and Corey Soulson and Brock Thoman, and like I say, Tim, and of course Kim Murphy and his science team. And it was just a great time. I did have one experience of the seas that kind of went underwater a little bit, but then research.
You should be doing the trip.
Yeah, right.
Don't you have a rim shot in this show?
We should.
We should.
But I had been assigned to write a show about marine geology, and so I studied for months putting this show together. And you know, we had oh geez, there was like a hydrologic cycle in mid-ocean ridge and plate tectonics and subduction zones and all kinds of things. And I thought I was really good because the team started calling me Dr. West. They thought I got my PhD in this underwater stuff. So I went into a room one time to present the show to Randy, and he was there, and Pat Scanlon and a few other people. And I got about 5 minutes into the show, and suddenly Randy takes his handkerchief out and waves it. And he goes, "Stop, I can't take anymore." I felt really good at that point.
Well, the fact that he had a handkerchief.
Yeah. He should have given it to me because I was crying.
Oh.
So all that work and my pride in the seas had vanished. And I went back crestfallen to my office, and Pat Scanlon called me up and said, "Come on down, I want to talk to you." And Pat was just a great guy.
Yeah.
Still is.
Yeah.
And he called me in, and he basically gave me a great pep talk, which I think when you get to the point where you become a leader, the best thing you can do is how you react when your people fail or you fail and they watch how you react. And Pat was a prime example that it was, look, I know it didn't work out, but there's something better that you can do. Just go back to your office and start working on something. And it turned around and became an animated atlas of the world in one of the sea base modules there at the Living Seas. And it went on to win several educational film awards for the Disney Educational Media Company. So what started out as a complete disaster turned out to be a pretty good show after all.
There you
That's
go.
great.
And didn't you get to present that show to a man in a white glove?
Actually, it was just his glove. It was really interesting.
Oh, right.
Yeah, Michael Jackson came in one time and we did a presentation on the seas for him. And I had the storyboard. The old days we had big cork storyboards up on the wall. And Michael had a bodyguard with him by the name of Chucky. Well, Chucky was the size of a house. And I went to do my presentation, and Chucky was standing literally in front of my entire storyboard.
Oh, wow.
So I had to politely and gingerly ask Chucky if he would mind just moving like to the next state so I could. So I did get to show it, and Michael was so sweet. He went up and looked at one of Tim's renderings, which were just all great, and we had the underwater submersible in there, and he just said, "Can I ride that?" And of course, being the brown nosers we were, we said, "Absolutely, you can do whatever you want."
Right. So around this time is the beginning of the No Dough Productions. Tell us about No Dough.
I think it existed earlier, right? It was started by Potencio.
Right.
Yeah.
No dough, DOUGH, meaning no money.
No money.
Right.
Yeah, it was X started that No Dough Productions, and what it meant was we would go out in the hall and grab people out of the hallway back at Studio A in the 1401 building and throw them into a sound booth and say, "Here, read this," you know. And they were sideline characters and voices for the shows. And to your point, Ryan, we didn't get paid anything because, quote, we were already getting paid to be there.
Right.
You're already there.
The fact that you brought another talent to the show didn't mean anything.
Right.
So tell
So
us.
we did that, and I did, gosh, Commander Fulton. I was a snoring monk in Spaceship Earth. Thank you very much. One of my stars. And the caveman in space. I think I can still remember my lines. It's umba day, my dos day, umba day.
Oh yeah,
A little different than Thomas Jefferson, but it got me another job.
Oh wow.
So yeah, but X led that, and it was a lot of fun. X was again just an amazing man, and we just had a good time with it. And I actually ended up voicing Atlas in an animated Atlas. Mainly,
perfect. Wow.
I could afford for my show because they didn't have to pay me anything.
Right.
Of course.
Awesome.
So now our paths cross.
Yeah.
Finally at WDI. In fact, I had just started WDI. One of my first projects I worked on, because I came from animation, I did characters, and Randy Bright called me in, and there's Mike West in the room, and we're being asked to work on what was the Carousel of Progress. Tell us about it.
Well, it was America Sings.
Well,
It was
Right.
America.
right, with the Carousel of Progress, it became America
Right,
Sings,
right.
but now
I wanted to close it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was a concept actually that that Eddie Sato
Right.
had come up with about changing the carousel into a spaceship, and Eddie built this amazing model for it, and it's still to this day is my favorite show title. It's Ziggy Zygor's Intergalactic Hyperspace Circus and Traveling Droid Extravaganza. And I think we canceled it because we
Roll off
couldn't.
your tongue.
I think we canceled it because we couldn't afford the marquee. But it was actually my first show producing job that Randy offered me to take the reins on that. And we got to our first set of drawings, and we kind of realized that it wasn't really going to work the way we thought it was going to work. It was based primarily on the Bird and Robot show that Bob Rogers had done for the post show at World of Motion. And that was such a huge success that we thought, well, let's just get a bunch of robots and put them in each one of the carousel positions, and we'll do a circus show with robots. And I went to Randy at that point and said, I don't think this is going to work. So I think we should stop. But then Ryan came along.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's weird is you did all that work, and then Rick Rothschild and Chris Brunko took it over, because in '87 I was asked to be a writer on PT Quantum's Fantastic Galactic Review, which is awfully close, a little shorter, so we could afford the marquee.
Right.
And we got to pitch to Michael Jackson, because Michael was huge, and the idea was he was going to be an animatronic and moonwalk and be one of the aliens, which if you saw Men in Black, might have been. And, but yeah, and then it got killed because the budget was too high for an existing building. You know, the facility was there. So
Yeah.
it's too bad. But Joe and I have actually repitched that to other clients.
Other clients. Maybe someday it'll get
Yeah,
built.
it's a great idea. So it may not ever be at Disneyland, but we're going
Maybe
to see to
somewhere
it somewhere.
Well, I'll see if I can dig up the old drawings in the script.
Yeah, that would save us some money. That'd be great.
But...
So then you worked on Primetime Cafe. Disney MGM was started. That was my project then too.
Right.
And we were together. That tell us everything you did on Disney MGM, which is celebrating its 35th anniversary this year.
Unbelievable.
And just to plug it, there will be an event at Celebration on May 3rd through 6th for anybody who's interested.
Yeah. And Mike will be there.
And I'll be there.
And I'll be there.
Yep, the whole gang. It's going to be a reunion.
Yeah.
Bob Weiss asked me in late '80, after the season opened, or in early '87, to come and work with him and on the team on the Disney MGM studios. So I was thrown onto the Monster Sound show, and then I also did the produce a video for the 50s Primetime Cafe, and then with Russell Brower, we put together all the music background tracks for the entire park. Oh, there's it.
Wow. Oh, yeah.
That's the Bearded Wonder on the right, and then that's Gary Rorman to the far right.
Oh, wow.
Who was a show director, and we ended up hiring Gary away from SAC Comedy Lab.
SAC right.
Wow. Very, very talented guy.
Okay. So this show was the one that starred Martin Short and who was the other way?
Chevy Chase.
Yeah, Chevy Chase. Yeah, it was so long ago.
Any stories?
Yeah. Any stories?
Well, the film was called Mr. Lucky, and that was back in the days when every attraction had to have a star in it somewhere. So we got Chevy and Martin and a guy named Jim Abrahams, who was part of the Zucker, Abrams, and Zucker trio.
Oh, yeah.
And Naked Gun, and Robert K. Weiss produced the film on that side of the business. He was probably best known for the Blues Brothers. He did that film and a bunch
of. Oh, wow, cool.
But yeah, we shot that on a stage in downtown LA, and it was interesting because I don't know if anybody remembers the show, but at the end of the show, the idea was that the guests provided the sound effects for the film. They would see the film with everything in black and white, and then we would play it back, and they would provide the sound effects. Then we'd play it back in color with their sound effects. Well, the last scene in the show was a branch that would fall down, and the original one you saw, it hit Chevy. Marty was on top of it, with an anvil, and he was trying to kill Chevy in the whole movie. And he'd come down and would knock Chevy down, and he'd fall down and give him his card that said "Lucky Life Insurance." But then during the recording of the sound effects, we asked the audience with a cue card that said "Look out," so the whole audience would yell "Look out." And then when you played it back, you'd hear "Look out." Chevy would look up and step back, and the branch, the tree missed.
It changed. Okay.
Right. So during the production, I was explaining that to Chevy, and he said, "That'll never work. They'll never understand that." And he bet me $1,000.
Whoa.
Yeah. And he never paid.
So Chevy Chase, if you're watching this,
Yeah,
you're
Yeah.
on mic.
On my money.
That's awesome. So 89, the park opens, and you kind of had it with LA, right? Things were shaking a little bit too much for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to go back to my sound show for a
Oh
second.
yeah, please.
Oh, please.
There was a post-show piece that we did called Sound Stations.
Oh yes, yes.
First
Sorry.
binaural experience that we
Oh yeah, yeah,
Amazing.
yeah.
and yeah, it really became one of the jewels of the park, is so so we actually took and had a recording head that they used to use to measure dB levels in Mercedes, so we called him Fritz affectionately.
Really?
And so we used Fritz to record the sound dimensionally. And the thing back then was you couldn't edit the binaural recordings we were doing. We were on a reel-to-reel. So that was Fritz, and the latter show, Sounds Dangerous.
Yeah.
But because we couldn't edit, we had to do everything in one take. It was a 5-minute show.
Yeah.
So if somebody blew a line or if a sound effect wasn't right, we had to go back and do it again. And we did 36 takes before we got it right, because I know we bought 36 cans of soda. Open and pop in the ear, and
Wow.
and Joe Harrington still is the sound effects master, and sound is still at WDI, as a matter of fact. And Joe is incredible. He would create all these live effects on the stage as we were performing things. And
Wow.
that next shot that you had actually was when we went to do Sounds Dangerous with Drew Carey as one of the next shows in that theater. And the script called for Drew to cross the street, and I wanted to have cars whizzing by. And so I thought, well, the racetrack, the Richard Petty race experience had just opened at the Magic Kingdom here at Walt Disney World. So we went out to record the cars. So we put Fritz in the middle of the track of the straightaway, and the equipment was behind him. And then we would have 3 of these massive race cars go by left, right, left. And they'd hit about 100 some miles an hour going by Fritz. And I was actually like the pit crew. I had my my headphones on, and I was talking to the drivers, and I feel like, you guys get a little closer. Yeah, okay. So, a little closer. And I said, could you get a little closer? It's not really sounding right. And so all of a sudden I'm listening to something. And it went silent. And I looked up, and there's the reel-to-reel rolling down the straightaway along with Fritz bouncing along the road. And that's in the back. I had Fritz, cuddling him in my hands, see if he was all right. And believe it or not, he only lost his left ear is what came off. And so we patched it up and took him to Melbourne the next day to record a circus with some elephants for the show. And from that point on, we called him Van Gogh.
That's awesome. It's so amazing that so much work went into that, when today you can do it digitally, probably in about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right?
Your iPhone.
Wow.
Yeah.
But Joe, you can see here, that's Joe Harrington, and Joe just got in harm's way just to get a sound effect. He's truly a genius. And there's a great picture. That's Joe's son to my left, and you can see the elephant is just about ready to squirt Ben. And Ben has actually taken up Joe's career now. He's doing great sound stuff.
Ben,
Hi,
Ben's
Ben.
great. Yeah, hi Ben. I hope you're watching.
Awesome.
Yeah, we love working with Ben.
Yeah, that's great. Okay.
So now,
Wait. Let me just bring up one other thing.
so
The haircut. One of my favorite things was sitting in that dark room with the yellow padded headsets and listening to the haircut and the hair dryer and all that. Tell us about that and how that, continued in other shows.
Well, it did, and it turned out every binaural show I think we did, except for the Knowledge Vortex at Xerox at Interventions, we had a haircut in it. I mean, the Rito of Lincoln, I didn't do that show, but there was a haircut, and
Yeah.
but it was truly amazing. And when they did the hair dryer, you really felt
Yeah.
Yeah.
your ear. I mean, it was just it was astounding. And
Yeah.
binaural sound had been around for a very long time. But Joe brought somebody in to do a demo for us at Marty's conference room before we started this, and he was shaking matches in our ears and opening a can of soda and just individual sound effects. And we thought, well, that's not going to work. It's cool. So we were the kind of the first ones to take and put it into a story and use it in a context for an attraction. And it turned out so well. We did it for Alien Encounter. We did it for Song of the Rainforest. We did it for Knowledge Vortex. So we used it quite a bit after that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay.
Okay,
So
now the
now-
earth is shaking.
1989, Earth is shaking. New
You're
York
in
is
California.
Yeah, and we got to mention one of my mentors, the great George Head, who's now been gone just over a year.
Right.
Also a huge guy, literally on Disney MGM Studios, and so you and he make a decision. Tell us.
We actually plotted.
Plotted.
Because George wanted to move to Florida as well, and so after the studios opened, we suggested to Bob Weiss and Marty Sklar that maybe George and I stick around with a ragtag group of people and kind of relaunch WDI East, if you will. And so Marty agreed and Bob agreed. And in fact, I would always ask Marty, I said, you agreed to that awfully fast when we asked you that. You thought it was a good idea, or did you just want to get rid of me? And he said, yes.
Yes.
Smart one.
That sounds like
So
Marty.
we did. We were in a trailer on the back lot of the studios and just started working with the parks in the partnership, because at that point we had the Disney MGM Studios, Epcot Center, Magic Kingdom, Blizzard Beach was coming online.
Typhoon Lagoon, Pleasure Island.
I'm sorry, Typhoon Lagoon, right, was the first one. Pleasure Island was launching. Wonders of Life was launching later that year. It was a big year.
Yeah.
And so we really set out to partner with the people, with the folks at Walt Disney World, because what would happen in the past, we'd fly in from California, we'd say, "Oh, you did terrible, don't do that," and we fly out.
Right.
And while the operators were left with the issue of how do we deal with something that's not working in the field.
Yeah.
So we thought that at least by being there with them, we could overcome these obstacles in a much more positive way and maintain the show quality as well.
Right. Okay. So now you got to rewrite the script for Indiana Jones, Epic Stunt Spectacular.
Yeah, we opened it, and then somewhere in 90 or 91, someone decided that we should get a Broadway director involved to restage the show.
It was a good show. Okay.
So I was sequestered up in the Marriott Marquis Hotel for a week in New York, working with the director on this whole new flamboyant way to do Indy. And we installed it, and the stunt guys were not real happy with it. I mean, they weren't used to doing Broadway music.
Like, the song and dance piece didn't work.
How many musical numbers were
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I offered to bring up some songs from 1776, but they didn't want to do it. So that was a great adventure. But over the course of the years being there, of course, we worked a lot with a cast and some show elements. In fact, there was one time, the beginning of the show, the director would bring people in from the audience, right?
Yeah.
And they would cast into the show. Well, and they all lined up. And at that particular show, the president of Coca-Cola was in the audience with Bruce LaValla, who was then the vice president of the studios. And the director said to the guests in the show, "Oh, you got the right one, baby," pointing to his sneakers. Well, that was Pepsi's big tagline at that point.
Oh.
The president of Coke, the head of Coke, was sitting in the audience with Bruce. Not a happy man.
Oh.
So I said, "Look, we used 36 cans of Coke when we did the Soundstation show, so it's okay."
It's okay.
All right.
So, but that just shows you that if you go off script and you don't at least follow the parameters, things can happen. So that was the thing we learned on several
Good lesson.
Yeah.
Good lesson.
So 1995, mid-90s now, binaural sound has been a hit at these other locations, and someone decides to make it a show in Tomorrowland at the Magic Kingdom. Tell us about the birth of the extraterrestrial
Alien Encounter.
Yeah, that was a great show. A great writer that we had at the time, also Dan Molitor, started out on that, and I got to join a little bit later on, and we put together what we thought was kind of a scary show, and we recorded it binaural, and the two speakers were in the back of the seats that you see people leaning back in. Of course, then a car that came out, which meant you were trapped once the show started. But again, Joe Harrington was amazing on this. He the sound of the creature flying around inside the theater, we hooked Joe up on a harness and swung him around inside the theater with these big metal claws on his hand, and he was raking the walls to make it sound like the claws of the creature.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And then when we had glass shatter, Joe developed this concoction. There was a big tube with compressed air, and he dumped bags and bags of Navy pea beans into it and aimed it at the head at Fritz and fired it. And these Navy pea beans just flew across the recording device and all over the theater. And it sounded just like this massive glass tube had broken and shattered all over the darkness.
Wow. Did Fritz's ear withstand the impact?
Yeah, he was totally healed by that time. Then we called him. No, but it went really well, and we had what we thought was a great show. And we put signs, graphics all over the outside saying, "Warning, may be too scary for young children," yada yada. But the first show, we went to show it to Michael Eisner. We hadn't told any of our family or friends what the show was about because we wanted to have them be fresh in audience. So it was a Saturday night, and Michael came to see the show, and family and friends, and we're in that circular theater, and I was sitting next to Michael in one row, and my daughter, Katie, and my wife, Chris, were in the row in front of me. Well, the lights go out, and people are screaming and yelling and, hysterical. And I thought, this is really cool, because Michael leans over and he goes, "Are people always like that?" And of course, this is the first time we had done it, but I said, "Sure, absolutely." And so the lights came on and we're leaving, and I wanted to introduce Katie and Chris to Michael, and Katie was just bawling. She was hysterically crying. She had been so scared by this thing.
Oh my God.
And Michael goes, "Is that your daughter?" And I said, "Yeah." "Oh, great show," and he leaves. Well, I get a call, I think from Tom Fitzgerald early the next morning, saying that Michael wants to change the show. It's too scary. So
Katie, it's your fault.
Yeah, I blame Katie for that. But it turned out to be a really great show. And yeah, these are the graphics that we all over the place. I don't know how much more clearer we could make it.
Yeah.
It could be frightening, but I guess people thought it was a Disney show. So
we should bring it back. That was classic.
Yeah.
It was so good. We've also tried to reinvent that show
for other clients.
We're going to bring it back for other clients. Mark our words.
Well,
never dies.
We still have people in therapy, years.
That's good. I like that. So, Mike, we're getting a little tight on time. We just, in a minute, maybe sum up your final years at Disney, where you did the Drew Carey and the Tower of Terror and Interventions and Disney Studios Paris. Before we move on,
there's Drew, but I did want to get in some of the Universal stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's hop over there.
Yeah, we can. In 2006, I went over to Universal Creative and started at the Simpsons Ride that we did both California and Florida, and that won a TEA award. And then from there, it was I forget the order, but ended up doing Transformers the Ride and Despicable Me Minion Mayhem and Springfield and Kransky. We had an episode. I was on the Today Show with Al Roker. And I did a Krusty line, and then of course he had to do a Krusty line, so we had a Krusty off on the Today Show
with Al Roker.
Yeah, with Al Roker.
So at this point, Mike, had you transitioned from being the writer, creative director to more of a producer role?
Right. I'd worked my way from writer and then director, and then into a show producer role. But I always maintained a creative part in the show. I was more of a creative producer because I couldn't do just the business part of it. I really enjoyed the creative part. And so I was fortunate enough to work with really understanding creative directors in my projects. They just put up with me. So we did that, and then the last project that opened was Skull Island: Reign of Kong in 2016, which is a great project. I was very proud.
Yeah.
Can I put the time
Yeah,
machine
yeah.
here in reverse? 'Cause
Yeah.
You had a great, maybe one of your last gigs at Disney. And I remember I sat in a couple brainstorms and said, God, these guys working on this have the best gig in the company. And that was Adventures by
Yes,
Disney.
yes.
Talk to us a little bit
Yes,
about
we see
that
you in,
gig.
we see you in Hawaii with the Mai Tai.
Yeah.
Yeah,
on a
That's
surfboard.
exactly right. Yeah, Bob Zock and I were given the opportunity to launch and create the creative aspects of a brand new business for the company, Adventures by Disney. And the first two adventures were Escape to Paradise in Hawaii, and then the other one was Quest for the West, not named after me, in Yellowstone and Grand Tetons. And it was amazing. Yeah, one afternoon, Bob and I were sitting on a beach in Hawaii and with Mai Tais, and I said, "Do you believe we're getting paid for this?" Oh yeah, we got to go surfing. You know, this looked really impressive until you look at the background, the guy standing waist deep in water.
All right.
All right.
You gotta airbrush that out.
Yeah. So, but it was a great thing because we took people and surfing lessons on the adventure, and we had a Disney guide that followed kind of the Disney show, and then we had a local guide that talked about the areas that we were in. But now I think there's over 22 adventures on it.
Wow, it's still going strong.
Yeah, it really is, and we were very blessed to be part of that opening. I had a great time.
So what was it like to do the Kong and work with Peter Jackson and create an awesome attraction for?
Yeah, it was great. We had to turn a pile of rock in the queue in Skull Island into a show, and we didn't want to use media because Indiana Jones had used a newsreel in their pre-show.
Oh, right.
We had to develop a way to create a show and a story without media, really. So we did it with sound effects, and we did it with a little peek of one of the indigenous people from the island, and then you came around a corner, and there was a Shaw woman when you're first introduced to Kong and the roar, and then you went into a very tight area in the queue, and live for the first time ever in a Universal attraction, we had live scare actors that were part of that, and then you'd get from there into the loading area. And we didn't want people to think it was a ride. We wanted to think it was an adventure. So that was the first trackless ride system that Universal had done. So when you got in that big truck, there was no track in front of you. You just went around and finally got to see the big guy at the end. And the original ending was going to be another screen, another video screen. And I fought like crazy. I said that Kong has to come back as Kong. Yeah. In fact, somebody somewhere has a really awful video of me, I think, on a conference table acting out Kong to Mark Woodbury.
Love to see that.
Yeah. So I hope not, Joe. So that was good, and very blessed to work with a company called Creature Technology Corporation in Melbourne, Australia, and they just did such an amazing job with Kong. They were Sonny Tilders and Tim Rolfe and Richard McKenna. They just did an amazing job with that figure.
Wow. Now, did you go on Project Runway to promote this?
Yeah, the Synergy people thought it would be a good idea to tie Kong into several shows that we did, and one was Project Runway. And the assignment for the people on the show was to come up with a jungle outfit for the jungle of New York. And I thought, well, yeah. There's Tim Gunn, and that was about 112 degrees that day. It was. That's why I had that pleasant look on my face.
Wow.
He was an extremely nice man. And we also did an episode of Face Off.
Right.
Mackenzie Westmore, and they were designed. The idea was they were supposed to take some of the creatures of Skull Island and create a human character, as if one of them would evolve into a human. So that was their assignment.
Wow. That's so cool.
So there's been a lot in the news recently about Universal's Epic Universe.
Yeah.
And we should go on record and say, who was the first producer for that incredible project?
Yeah.
Mike
West. Wow.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. What you get.
It was well, now it's out, so I can't. But I was the producer on the original Blue Sky group, along with Ross Osterman and a bunch of other people and Dale Mason. And so we put together the first kind of land ideas, if you will, for the park. But I told Mark Woodbury at the time that by the time this opens, which at that point was supposed to be 23, I think, I said, I'm going to be retired. And he said, no, you'll hang around. I said, no, I won't. So after we got through kind of the initial blue sky development, they brought in a wonderful lady named Sarah Gibbon, and she took on the executive producer role at that point to take it through the next phase. And I went on and did some really fun stuff with Jason Sorrell, of all people.
Cool.
Wow, yeah.
Well, you had a big birthday about 2 weeks ago, huh?
I did. I was 29.
Wow. On what leg?
That's per limb, Joe.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a good
Wow.
birthday.
Wow.
Awesome. Well, we always end
That-
every
that's
show by asking our esteemed guests one question, because Joe and I are on this eternal
Quest.
search, quest to uncover the mystery of what do you think makes a guest experience timely,
Yeah,
yet
timeless.
Well, I think there's two aspects of it. Number one, and I'm going to steal from a quote that I had in the Imagineering Way book,
Ooh,
wow.
that in all the years I've been in the business, you realize that projects come and go, and attractions open and close. I've had a lot of those close over the 40 plus years,
Yeah.
and things don't always last from the project standpoint. But I think if you build a relationship based on a foundation of trust and value, not only with your team members, but with the guests that you're creating these for, that ultimately that makes the difference between success and failure in your career. And I firmly believe that it's really all about the people. If you look at the number of people you guys still know over all your careers, and you become a family, right?
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big business, but it's a small world after all.
Yeah.
And it's really about the relationships you would build. And if you have that with each other, and especially with the park operators and the guys that have to make it work once you build it, then it ultimately creates a better guest experience. Because if you open something and it doesn't work, the operations guys are going to change it. They have to, because they're the ones that on the front line to face the wrath of the guest if something isn't right. So best get them working with you right up front on any project, be it ops, tech services, food and beverage, because ultimately it'll be a much better guest experience.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Mike.
Insightful.
Yeah. I think we were, again, fortunate to have worked with the guys who worked with Walt.
Mhm.
Walt was the man who coined the phrase guest, not a
Right.
customer,
Right.
And thinking about how can I make an experience for a human being, thinking about the people. And not to editorialize, but I think if Disney and other companies have kind of lost their way a little bit, it's because they've stopped thinking about the customer as a guest.
Yeah.
Right. And I think there's also a social aspect of what we do in the parks that's so vitally important, especially now that
Yeah.
everybody's kind of buried in their phones and their iPads. And
Yes.
to go out and be in a park and hop on a Kong vehicle with 71 other strangers and share that experience.
Yeah.
There's something really magical about that.
Yeah.
And it's becoming more challenging as you walk through the parks. Everything now is based on your phone, right? So people, again, have their noses buried in their phone, wondering whether their next pass is going to come in or what time they have to be at such and such. So I think it's a challenge for people developing things down the road to figure out, how do we keep that social aspect? How do we get people to look up from their phone and look at each other and say hi? I just
or enjoy these multi-billion-dollar environments.
Okay,
Right.
that's a great challenge for any of you young upcoming future designers.
Right.
Mike has thrown down the gauntlet for you.
So, Mike, what are you doing now? What's the future for Mike West?
Well, I have a company I started up called Innovative West. That's basically me. And Chris, she works out on it too. But just doing some freelance work. Although Chris keeps reminding me I retired for a reason.
Right.
So I get to kind of choose and pick and choose who I want to work with and what I want to do. For 40 years, I had somebody else telling me this is a good idea, go build it.
Right.
Now I can go, that's not a good idea, I'm not going to go build it.
There you go.
Right.
Wow.
One quick story before we go on the that's not a good idea. I forgot on the Monster Sound show.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. We're going back. That line brought me back.
Well,
to something.
time machine goes forward and back. That's what's great
It's the
about
time
it.
machine. But when we were reviewing the Monster Sound show, Michael Eisner would come through every so often, and he came to one and he suggested a change, and he went away. And Gary Worm and I tried to make it work in the show, and it didn't work. It was just not working. So we took it back out. Well, the next review, they came and there was Jeffrey Katzenberg, me, and Michael sitting in the theater, and we did the show, and what Michael wanted wasn't there. So he turns and he says, "If I give you an idea and you don't like it, just say, Michael, that was a bad idea. Don't ignore it." And I thought, uh-oh, how am I going to get out of this? And Jeffrey Katzenberg leans across in front of me and he goes, "Michael, that was a bad idea." And I was like, oh, yeah. And so thank you, Jeffrey, all these years later.
Oh, yeah. Well, it certainly wasn't a bad idea to have Mike West
Yes.
on the show today.
Yes.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
Mike. It was awesome.
Thank
What
you.
an amazing career.
Yeah.
Wow.
We're gonna go see Island. Why don't we go see Epic
Epic
Universe?
Yeah, let's see.
We'll
Yeah.
see what you're
Okay,
what you wound up
so
with.
let's get them time
Thank you all
machine
for,
going. Thank you, everybody, for coming by today. Thanks again, Mike. So
Thank
great
you,
to see your
Mike. Stick
smiling face.
around.
Okay.
Safe travels, guys.
Okay,
Bye.
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 Thank you all so much for joining us today with Mike West. And we hope you enjoyed the ride. And we want to thank Mike again for time traveling with us today. So if you have any questions for Mike, please stick around for our live Q&A in just 60 seconds. And on behalf of Zeitgeist Design and Production, we thank you for spending an hour of your time with us on the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. If you enjoyed the journey, please check out all 32 of our time travel adventures on our YouTube channel or under the Zoomcast section at zeitgeist-usa.com/Zoomcast. They're also available as podcasts wherever you listen. Open your diary now and plan to join us on Friday, March 22nd, when our very first passenger, former Disney Imagineer Tom Morris, reboards our time machine to complete his journey from the 1980s to today, with stops at Disneyland Paris, Hong Kong Disneyland, and Cars Land.
Get it.